e4, d5 on the board. The 7th round of the NFOC blitz. We have pawn captures and queen takes. This is the Scandinavian Opening on the board. White proceeds with knight to c3, attacking the queen, and queen to d6, bringing the queen back to a safe spot. Now the second knight comes out, and we have the first knight to f6 on the board. Black places bishop out to c4, and we have pawn to a6. White instantly castles on the board. The idea now is to play the move b5, and black plays it b5, preparing the bishop coming forward, and bishop back to b3, keeping the bishop along the diagonal. And he plays the bishop to b3. Now we have pawn to d3 on the board, activating the other bishop. Now pawn to e6, rook comes out, and then knight bd7. And now queen to e2 was played. Better move would have been bishop to g5. And now we have the move bishop to e7 and bishop to g5 now played, trying to connect the two rooks on the board, and black quickly castles. And now the second rook comes out into the game, and here black strikes with c5, and instantly we have the move a4 on the board, trying to soften up this b5 pawn. And now queen to b6 was played. Pawn captures, then pawn recaptures. So now black has the open side on the board with the rook, and knight to e5 comes in. A slight mistake on the board. Knight captured, queen captures. Now what black has successfully traded his inactive knight for white's central knight on the board. And now the move queen to c3 was played, activating it, and then f3, not a happy move, and pawn to c5 was played, and pawn captures. We have bishop to a4, a huge mistake on the board, because I think white may have missed something in his calculation. And after queen takes, the move that white plays, queen to c7, attacking both bishops, and here black finds the winning move, defending both bishops simultaneously. I think this is what white missed in his calculation, and plays the move king to h1. And we have knight to d5 on the board, trying to force as many exchanges as possible, and queen to g3 was played. I think black will definitely go for this bishop, yes, and it does. Queen takes. Now the strategy for black now is to try and exchange as many pieces as possible, as it will give it a bishop versus knight endgame. Rook to b1 played, so the pawn helps white to activate his rook, and queen comes to c3, the only defending move, and now brings the rook up. Black reaches out for his bishop and places his bishop on a safe square, and instantly h3 was played on the board. We have pawn to h6, attacking the queen and creating a loft. Now queen to c1 was played, not a really happy move on the board, but yes, and he finds the best move on the board. Queen to f6, trying to create a fork for the knight. I'll bring the knight to f4, and then white sees the idea and places the rook to a1. Now the knight comes to f4 instead, attacking the rook. Rook to f2 was played, and then black comes in now, attacking the rook again. And now queen to e3 was played, defending the rook and also activating the queen. And yes, black brings his bishop, trying to consolidate his position. And then king to h2 was played. The idea might be to try and push this pawn to double attack both pieces, but it's not possible for now because due to queen takes, and the end pawn push on the board. The queen cannot capture this pawn because the rook is hanging at the same time. So he decides to pin the rook, and then we have pawn to g5, defending the knight. Black reaches out and then brings his rook back to f1, slight mistake there, and then the bishop comes back attacking Right now they are both under less than a minute to. They are both trying to play as fast as possible. Rook to a5 was played, threatening to play rather rook to c4. And then we have the move knight to d5, attacking the queen and also defending the pawn, and also threatening to play this move. And white comes in, queen to e5, and yes, black finds the winning move. Queen takes, and now that queen has been exchanged, it's more easier for black to win now in this position. Rook to c5, and bishop comes up. White snatches a pawn on the board and black activates his rook at the same time. So the idea now is to try and consolidate his pieces as much as possible. The rook comes straight now, and then we have rook to c7, trying to keep the king on the last rank. The king comes forward with g7. Now pawn attacks the knight, and now the knight comes instantly to g6. You can see the speed at which both players are playing. We have knight to rook comes in, and then the knight and the bishop now puts enormous pressure on the f3 pawn. Black comes in, and then rook now to a3. Now we have 3 pieces mounting pressure on this pawn. It seems like the pawn is actually going to be lost, so white looks for a move to try and consolidate this position. Plays rook f2 and knight takes instead. The better move would have been bishop takes, king comes down, and now king comes up. Now we have pawn to g5, stopping the king from coming forward, and the move f5 was played, pawn takes, and the king takes instead. Now the move pawn to c5, c4 was played, attacking the bishop. Now bishop to f5, best move in the position. We have rook giving check, and then king comes up. It's not possible because the knight is defended by both the pieces. Pawn to c5, rook comes in, and then rook defends the pawn. King comes in, rook check. The best move here is to bring the king in, but decides to still go back. And then rook comes in again, pawn to a6, a mistake. But here he doesn't find the best move, and he pushes the pawn. Takes pawn as I exchanged, pushes the pawn again, and then a check. King comes forward, and then snatches the pawn now. Takes, and now we have a completely winning position for bishop and knight endgame versus the rook with 2 pawns. Now king comes in. Both players are trying to make their last moves quickly. We have rook to b2 on the board. Now the idea, knight comes in, trying to hold on this outpost. The rook comes in to check, king comes in. We have the king coming in, and then knight check. Both players are making their last moves on few seconds here. We have king attacks the knight, and then pawn push, the best move in the position. Rook comes in, and then king comes now to g4. Rook comes now to b8, trying to check from the back, but he sees that he can defend with the knight from the back and check, and knight comes in now, and then king comes to f2, and then we have king to f4, leaving the king, and now king comes now to e5, now creating space for the king. Now rook comes in, stopping the knight from coming here, and then king comes back. We have rook check, king comes, attacks the rook comes to a4, and then and there's a mistake on the board, and now he loses the rook, and then knight check, and white resigns. What a game, what a game. Well, it was massive, and you can call this almost a flawless victory, as both players were making swift moves under a time. So please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.